It was just past sunrise when old Mrs. Langley, who lived alone at the edge of town, opened her creaky front door to let in the morning air. Her porch overlooked a stretch of dusty road and a row of pine trees that hadn't seen rain in weeks. Normally, the only thing she heard at this hour was the faint rustling of leaves and the distant hum of traffic. But today she heard something else. A sound so faint it might have been mist. A soft whimper, almost like a cry. Not quite human but not entirely animal either. Curious, she stepped out, squinting toward the trees. That's when she saw it. Near the base of an old pine tree, just off the gravel path, was a box. A cardboard box, the kind you'd use to carry groceries or store old books. It was dirty, slightly torn on one side, and something inside it moved. Mrs. Langley's heart skipped a beat. She shuffled down the steps, slowly but urgently, bracing herself for what she might find. She wasn't ready. Inside the box was a baby, no older than a few months, wrapped in a thin blanket that looked like it had been out all night. The infant's cheeks were red from the cold. His tiny fists clenched in the air as he let out another soft cry. But what truly stunned her was what stood between her and the box. A German shepherd. Guinea. Ribs showing. Its fur matted and eyes hollow with hunger. Yet there it stood, head low, body tense, as if ready to protect the baby with its life. Mrs. Langley froze. The dog didn't growl, didn't bark. It just looked at her as if it was silently pleading. Don't hurt him. For a moment neither moved. Then, almost like it understood, the dog stepped aside and sat down, still watching. Word spread through the town like wildfire. By noon, the street in front of Mrs. Langley's house was filled with police cars, news vans, and curious neighbors who had only seen things like this in movies. A baby left in a box. Protected by a stray dog? It was the kind of story that made headlines, but to the people of Millfield, it felt deeply personal. This was a quiet town, the kind where everyone knew everyone else. The kind where something like this just didn't happen. Officer Jenna Hart, one of the first responders, couldn't stop thinking about the dog. He wouldn't let anyone near the baby at first, she told reporters later. It was like he thought he was the child's guardian. The moment they reached for the box, the shepherd stood, placing himself in front of it. Only when Jenna knelt down and gently extended her hand, whispering softly, did the dog finally ease back. The baby was rushed to the hospital. He was malnourished but stable. The dog, though, he was in worse shape. Starving. Dehydrated. Covered in old scars. Yet somehow, despite his own suffering, he hadn't left the baby's side. Not even once. Nobody knew where the dog had come from. No collar, no microchip, no tags. Just a quiet, broken animal who had done something extraordinary. People started calling him Shadow, because of the way he'd followed the baby so closely, like a shadow that refused to leave. The name stuck. The hospital named the baby Noah. No one had any clue who he belonged to. No notes, no clues. Just a child left in the middle of nowhere. And a dog who'd kept him alive. Didn't make sense. How had the baby gotten there? Who left him? And why? The town buzzed with questions, theories, and rumors. Some thought the baby had been abandoned. Others wondered if it had been a desperate act by a mother in crisis. A few whispered darker possibilities, but those were hushed quickly. No one wanted to believe anything cruel could happen in their town. But the mystery only deepened. Late that night, as hospital staff reviewed security footage and police combed through nearby properties, a nurse noticed something strange. When they tried separating Shadow from the baby, just to clean and feed them both, the dog began to panic. He barked, whined, even scratched at the nursery door. The moment he was let back in, he settled beside the crib and didn't move. It was more than loyalty. It was like he knew the child, like they had been through something together. Jenna kept thinking about Shadow's eyes. There was pain in them but also purpose. This wasn't just any stray. There was a story behind this dog. A story no one knew yet. The next morning someone came forward. A young woman named Lacey, who worked at the local animal shelter, claimed she had seen the dog weeks ago near the outskirts of town. He had been limping, dragging what looked like an old baby blanket in his mouth. At the time, she thought he was just another lost dog scavenging through the trash. But now, it made her wonder. As the police expanded their search and people flooded social media with photos of Shadow and baby Noah, something else happened. Something no one expected. A woman showed up at the hospital. Pale, shaken, and silent. She didn't say much, but the moment she saw the baby, tears spilled down her cheeks. She didn't ask to hold him. She just looked at him. And whispered his name. Not Noah, but Eli. Who was this woman? Was she the mother? If so, why had she left him? And how did Shadow fit into all this? The answers, it seemed, were just beginning to surface. And what they would reveal would leave the entire town stunned. The woman who had whispered the name Eli stood frozen in the hallway. Her arms tightly crossed as if holding herself together. Officer Jenna Hart approached slowly, not wanting to startle her. She had seen this kind of silence before, when someone had too much to say but couldn't find the words. The woman looked up, her eyes red and tired. She looked like someone who hadn't slept in days. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "I didn't know where else to go." Jenna led her to a quiet room away from the buzz of the nurses and reporters gathering near the front. "Can you tell me your name?" she asked gently. "Rachel," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "Rachel Monroe." The name didn't ring any bells in the local records, but something about her felt genuine, too real to be pretending. She looked down at the floor, avoiding eye contact. "I know this sounds terrible, but I need to see him again. Just for a moment." "Is he your son?" Jenna asked carefully. Rachel hesitated. "Yes," she whispered, her voice cracking. "His name is Elijah, but I called him Eli." Her hands trembled. "I never meant to leave him. I swear I didn't. I thought I could keep him safe." The room fell silent. Outside the door, Shadow paced in the hallway, his claws lightly clicking against the tile. Every time a nurse passed with a tray or clipboard, he stopped and looked up at them, almost asking if it was time to go back in yet. Rachel noticed the sound. "The dog, is he okay?" she asked. Jenna nodded. "We're feeding him. He's weak, but he'll recover. He hasn't left your son's side since they found them." Rachel closed her eyes tightly, as if hearing that made her pain worse instead of better. "He saved him. I knew he would. I didn't know how or for how long, but I trusted him." "You trusted a starving dog with your baby?" Jenna asked, trying to stay neutral but struggling to understand. "It's not what it sounds like," Rachel said quickly. "Shadow wasn't always a stray. He used to be ours." She began to tell a story that none of them expected. A few months ago, Rachel had been living just outside town in a small rented trailer. She'd left an unhealthy relationship in another state and come to Millfield to start over. She had no family nearby, no job yet, and only a few dollars saved. But she had Eli and Shadow. She'd found Shadow a year earlier at a gas station off the interstate. He was already thin back then, but the moment he saw Rachel, he followed her to the car and refused to leave. At first, she tried to drive away, but when she looked in the rearview mirror and saw him still standing there, eyes wide and desperate, something inside her broke. She turned around and took him home. "He was always gentle," Rachel said. "Especially with Eli. He'd sleep under the crib, follow me around when I held him. He became like a second parent." But things had taken a bad turn. 2 weeks before the baby was found, Rachel lost her job at a local diner. The little savings she had went toward formula and rent, and soon she couldn't keep up. One night, she came home to find her trailer's front door kicked in. Someone had gone through her things. Nothing valuable was taken, she didn't own much, but she felt unsafe. That same night, she heard footsteps outside her window. That's when she knew she couldn't stay there anymore. She packed a small bag and decided to hide out in the woods near the edge of town, just for a night or two until she figured things out. She wrapped Eli tightly and carried him into the trees, with Shadow trotting beside her. She found a spot between two old pine trees, hidden from the road, and made a sort of nest out of clothes and an old box she'd used for storage. It wasn't smart, she admitted. But I didn't know what else to do. Rachel thought she could protect him. But on the third night things changed. She went to look for food, just a short walk into town and back. But she never made it back. I was crossing the lot behind the old hardware store when someone came up behind me, she said. Her hands shook as she remembered. They didn't say anything, just grabbed my bag. I fought back, but they shoved me. I hit my head. Everything went dark. When she woke up, it was morning. Her bag was gone. Her phone too. She didn't even know what day it was. She tried to run back to the woods, but she couldn't find the exact spot. She wandered for hours, calling for Eli, calling for Shadow, but the forest was quiet. The box was gone. So were they. I thought I lost them both, Rachel said, her voice breaking. I thought someone had taken them. I went to the sheriff's office, but I didn't have an ID. I didn't even know what to say. I was scared they wouldn't believe me, or worse, they'd take him away if he was found. Messed up. I know I did. But I never stopped looking. And now, somehow, Eli was safe, and Shadow had protected him. Jenna sat in silence, trying to take it all in. Rachel's story sounded impossible. And yet, there was something in her voice, something raw and broken that didn't feel like a lie. While the officers worked on verifying Rachel's identity and piecing together her story, the town kept buzzing. People wanted answers. Who was the mother? Where had she been? Why hadn't she come forward sooner? Everyone had an opinion, and none of them matched. Some people began to question Rachel's story. A few thought she was just trying to get attention or take credit for the miracle. Others believed her completely, moved by the image of a desperate mother trying to do right in a world that had been anything but kind to her. But in the middle of it all, one thing remained constant. Shadow. The dog refused to leave the baby's side. Even now, sleeping curled up next to the hospital crib like it was the only place in the world that mattered. The nurses said it was like he knew. Like he had made a promise. And he wasn't going anywhere until he knew Eli was safe for good. And still, something felt unfinished. Jenna couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story. Rachel was telling the truth, at least most of it. But there were details missing. Questions unanswered. How had the dog known exactly where to go? Why had no one seen them in the woods for days? And who had Rachel crossed paths with the night she disappeared? As the sun set behind the trees that evening, painting the town in gold and orange, something else surfaced. Something no one expected. A man showed up at the police station. Mid-40s, flannel shirt, a limp in his step. He claimed to recognize the dog. That German shepherd, he said, pointing to the photo on the bulletin board. I know him. He used to belong to someone I knew a long time ago. But that guy's been dead for over 2 years. That's when everything shifted again. Because if the man was right, Shadow had a past that no one saw coming. And whatever that past was, it was about to change everything. The man who claimed to recognize the German shepherd introduced himself as Tom Walker. He had the look of someone who'd spent years outdoors. Rough hands, weathered face, and a voice that cracked like dry wood. Officer Jenna sat with him in the quiet backroom of the station, notebook open, pen ready, unsure what to expect. She'd heard too many wild stories that week, but something about Tom felt different. Grounded. That dog, Tom said, tapping the photo again. His name was Ranger. Belonged to my old neighbor, Hank Dorsey. Lived up near Pine Hollow before he passed. Hank was a loner, but he cared about that dog more than anything. Said he found him abandoned on a roadside and raised him like family. Jenna frowned. But the dog in the photo, we've been calling him Shadow. He had no tags. No chip. Tom nodded. Hank didn't believe in microchips. Thought it was all government tracking nonsense. Kept to himself. After he died, Ranger just disappeared. Folks figured maybe animal control got him or he wandered off. But if this is him, I mean, it's been over 2 years. The timeline didn't make sense. If Ranger really was Shadow, where had he been all this time? And how had he ended up with Rachel and Eli? When Jenna brought the information to Rachel, her face went pale. She looked down, her eyes flicking side to side, as if trying to pull a memory from deep inside. I think Hank might have been the man who gave me Shadow, she said slowly. Back at that gas station. I remember a man there, old and kind, sitting on a bench with the dog. He offered me his sandwich. Said I looked tired. Rachel hadn't thought much of it at the time. Just another quiet stranger showing kindness. But now the pieces were shifting. If Hank had really given her the dog, maybe it wasn't just a random act. Maybe he saw something in her. Or maybe he knew something was coming. Meanwhile, the town was starting to split in two. Some people supported Rachel, donating diapers, clothes, even offering her a temporary place to stay. Others were more suspicious. A baby found in the woods, a stray dog with a mysterious past, and a mother who vanished for days. None of it sat right with them. Among them was Karen Miller, who ran the local daycare center. She had grown up in Millfield and took pride in knowing the ins and outs of the community. People want to believe in miracles, she said during an interview with a local reporter. But sometimes they forget to ask the hard questions. Like what kind of mother leaves her child in a box? Rachel heard the comments, saw the stares when she walked into the store with an officer escort. She kept her head down, tried to focus on Eli. But the doubt began to eat at her. Was she really doing the right thing coming back? Or had she made things worse by returning? To make matters more complicated, a social worker from the county had arrived to assess the situation. Her name was Marla Simmons, and she wasn't easily swayed by emotional stories or headlines. She observed Rachel closely, asked questions, watched how she handled Eli. But she also took a strong interest in Shadow. I've never seen a case like this, Marla admitted during a meeting with Jenna. The bond between the dog and child. It's incredible, but it also makes me wonder. That kind of connection doesn't just happen overnight. And she was right. Shadow, Ranger, had protected Eli with a loyalty that went beyond survival. It was as if the dog had been given a mission, and nothing, not even hunger or fear, could stop him from seeing it through. As days passed, another strange detail came to light. The baby blanket Eli had been wrapped in, the one Shadow had been dragging around according to the animal shelter worker, wasn't something Rachel recognized. That's not mine, she said, holding the fabric in her hands. I didn't own anything like this. The blanket was old, faded blue with a hand-stitched pattern on one corner. Jenna had it tested, hoping it might lead to something. What they discovered deepened the mystery. The thread used in the stitching wasn't common. It had come from a discontinued line of fabrics used in a local textile factory that shut down over 10 years ago. Jenna's mind raced. Was it possible someone else had taken care of Eli before Rachel got back? Or had Shadow, somehow, brought the child to someone who tried to protect him while Rachel was missing? As if that wasn't enough, security footage surfaced from a gas station near the town's outskirts. A woman matching Rachel's description was seen stumbling down the road, barefoot, holding her head. The timestamp placed it the morning after she claimed to have been attacked. But behind her, several yards away, was a dark figure in a hoodie, walking slowly. Then, just as she turned out of frame, the figure stopped and stared directly at the camera. The image was blurry, the face unrecognizable. But something about the stance, the stillness, it chilled Jenna. The man hadn't just been passing by. He was following her. Now there were too many layers. Possible stalker. A mother running from more than just poverty. A dog with a forgotten history. And a baby, somehow at the center of it all. Tom Walker returned to the station a few days later with something in his hand. An old photo. It was creased, edges torn, but the image was clear enough. It showed Hank Dorsey standing in front of his cabin, hand resting on Ranger's back. But in the corner of the photo, almost cropped out, was another figure. A man in a flannel shirt. His face was partly turned, but it looked hauntingly familiar. Jenna compared it to the gas station footage. The angles were different. The years between made it hard to say for sure. But she felt it in her gut. They were the same person. "Who's that?" she asked Tom. Tom looked at the photo, eyes narrowing. "That's Hank's nephew," he said slowly. "Real quiet type. Didn't come around much. Name was Mark or Marty. Something like that. Always made me uneasy." And just like that, the shadows around the story grew deeper. Somewhere out there was a man who had crossed paths with Rachel. Maybe more than once. A man with ties to the dog. Ties to Hank. Possibly even ties to Eli. As the pieces shifted again, Jenna knew one thing for sure. This wasn't just a story about a mother and her child. It wasn't even just about a heroic dog. There was something else moving beneath the surface. And whatever it was, it hadn't shown its full face yet. Late one evening, just as the hospital hallways quieted and the last visitors trickled out, Officer Jenna stood by the window of the pediatric ward, looking down at the parking lot below. Her eyes were tired, and her thoughts ran in loops. Eli was asleep in his crib, small chest rising and falling gently, and Shadow, still refusing to leave, lay curled beside the bed, ears twitching every now and then. It had become their rhythm. Silence, then questions. And now, something worse than both, waiting. The blurry image of the man from the gas station footage haunted Jenna more than she admitted. That shadowy figure wasn't just a passerby. He had watched Rachel, followed her, and possibly had something to do with what had happened in the woods. But without a name or a clear face, it was like chasing smoke. Still, every instinct told her they were running out of time. That same night, Rachel sat in the quiet room next door, staring at the worn baby blanket. She ran her fingers over the hand-stitched pattern again and again, as if the threads might whisper answers. Her memory was starting to return in pieces, flashes of movement, the smell of pine and gasoline, a voice behind her. Whoa, familiar. She didn't know who he was, but she was starting to think he knew her. And then there was Shadow. Every time Rachel entered the hospital room, the dog perked up, not out of excitement but as if on alert. He'd stare at the door for a few seconds after she entered, sniff the air, then circle the crib once before lying down. It was like he expected someone else to show up. Someone who hadn't yet. That same unease had reached the townsfolk too. People began locking their doors earlier, pulling their kids in from front yards a little quicker. Rumors spread fast. About the man in the hoodie, about Rachel's past, about Shadow's mysterious loyalty. Some even whispered that Shadow was more than a dog. That he remembered something everyone else had forgotten. 2 nights later, another call came into the station. This time, from an older woman named Lila Hammond. She lived in a small cabin near Pine Hollow and claimed she'd seen someone watching her property from the edge of the woods for 3 nights straight. She hadn't called before because she thought it was just a hiker. But tonight the man had stood closer. Watching. Holding something in his hand. Jenna drove out immediately, bringing Tom Walker with her. He knew the area better than anyone and had offered to help however he could. As they reached Lila's cabin, the trees around them seemed to close in, shadows stretching long beneath the moonlight. Lila greeted them at the door, flashlight in hand, face pale. "He was standing right there," she said, pointing past her porch to the edge of the tree-line. "Didn't move when I called out. Just stood there like he was waiting." They searched the area but found nothing, just footprints in the soft earth leading away from the trees, deep and deliberate. Whoever it was had been here a while. Watching. Back at the station, Jenna pinned the gas station photo next to the new printout of the footprints. And next to that, the old picture from Tom, the one with Hank Ranger and the man they now believed was his nephew. "I'm starting to think this man's been circling Rachel longer than we thought," Jenna said. "What if he followed her here? What if he was never after her? But the baby?" Tom looked up sharply. "You think he's connected to Eli?" "I don't know," Jenna said. "But I think he's watching. Waiting. And he's getting closer." Rachel hadn't left the hospital in days. She refused to go anywhere without Eli nearby. Even when Marla, the social worker, suggested a longer-term care facility or a quiet shelter, Rachel shook her head. Wherever we go, she said, he'll find us. I can feel it. Jenna believed her. Every time she passed the hospital's front doors at night, she checked the parking lot twice. She even requested extra patrols around the building just in case. Then one stormy evening something strange happened. The power flickered just after 2 a.m. A rolling thunderstorm had settled over the town, and lightning cracked through the sky like a warning shot. Inside the hospital, backup generators kicked in within seconds, casting the corridors in a dim yellow light. But the cameras, every one of them, glitched for almost a full minute. When they came back on, Shadow was gone. The crib was still there. Eli was still sleeping. But the dog that hadn't moved from that spot in days had vanished without a sound. Jenna arrived 10 minutes later, still in uniform, hair soaked from the rain. Check the doors, check the stairwells, check everything, she barked to the night staff. Rachel, already awake, was clutching Eli tightly, rocking him back and forth. He wouldn't leave, she kept saying. Not without a reason. That's when a nurse noticed something chilling. The side exit door, usually locked and alarmed, had been opened. The alarm had been silenced. Manually. And there, just outside in the rain, muddy paw prints led away from the building. But beside them, just barely visible in the floodlight's glow, were boot prints. Heavy ones. The two trails headed toward the woods. Shadow's chasing him, Rachel whispered. He knows. Jenna didn't waste another second. She radioed for backup, then grabbed her flashlight and headed out into the rain, following the prints. Tom met her at the edge of the forest, soaked to the bone but ready. They followed the trail deeper into the woods. Every branch creaked in the wind, every snap of a twig made them pause. The tension was unbearable. The only light came from Jenna's flickering beam and the occasional flash of lightning overhead. Then, in the distance, a low growl. They stopped. And there, just ahead, they saw him. The man in the hoodie, standing near the old clearing, face still hidden, a large backpack slung over one shoulder. And Shadow, low to the ground, teeth bared, inches from him. But the man wasn't afraid. He turned slowly, calmly. Then he spoke. I've been looking for him, he said. His voice was cold, familiar. And just like that, every thread of the story, the missing days, the strange blanket, the loyal dog, the watching eyes, snapped into place. Only one question remained. Who was he? And what did he want with Eli? The answers were just seconds away. But nothing could have prepared them for what came next. Jenna gripped her flashlight tighter, her other hand hovering near the holster on her hip. The rain continued to fall in heavy sheets, the beam of light trembling as it caught the stranger's face. Only partially. He didn't flinch, didn't blink. Just stared, soaked through, calm as stone. Shadow remained still, standing between them and the man, every muscle taut. I've been looking for him, he repeated. His eyes shifting past Jenna, beyond the trees, toward the hospital, toward Eli. Jenna took a step forward, her voice low but firm. Who are you? He didn't answer. Instead, he slowly lowered the backpack from his shoulder and placed it on the ground. Then he knelt beside it, unzipping it carefully, as if trying not to startle Shadow. Jenna motioned to Tom to stay back, her eyes never leaving the man. From the backpack, he pulled out a small, folded piece of fabric, blue, worn, and unmistakable. Another blanket, identical to the one found with Eli. Rachel's voice echoed in Jenna's head. That's not mine. Now there were two. The man stood again, holding the fabric like it was fragile. His voice cracked this time, low and rough. I didn't mean for it to happen like this. I was just trying to protect him from her. The words hit Jenna like a jolt. From who? The man's jaw tightened, and for the first time, a flicker of emotion crossed his face. Not anger, grief. You don't understand, he said. She wasn't supposed to find him. Not again. Behind Jenna, Tom shifted uncomfortably, but remained silent. The man reached into his jacket and pulled out a small photo, soaked and curling at the edges. He held it up, arm shaking. Jenna stepped closer cautiously. The picture showed a woman, smiling, holding a newborn baby. And standing beside her was the man now facing them. But the woman wasn't Rachel. It was someone else entirely. And the baby, Jenna recognized the eyes. Everything around them seemed to go quiet, even as the storm raged. Only the sound of breath and the rustle of trees filled the space between them. "She was my sister," the man whispered. "And that boy, he's my nephew." Jenna's mind spun. If that was true, then who was Rachel? Back at the hospital, Rachel stood by the window, watching the tree line as if she could feel something unraveling in the distance. Eli stirred in his sleep, tiny fists curling. Shadow's absence made the room feel hollow, like something essential had gone missing. She didn't know why, but fear was building in her chest again, thick and unshakable. A knock on the door startled her. Marla, the social worker, stepped inside. She looked troubled, holding a folder in her hands. "I've been digging," she said quietly, "and I found something odd in the system." Rachel frowned. "What kind of odd?" "The birth record you gave us. It's legitimate. But there's a second entry. Another file. Same birth date, same hospital. Different mother's name." Rachel's knees almost gave out. "What?" Marla placed the file on the bed. "I don't think someone just made a mistake. I think someone tried to cover something up." Rachel sat down slowly, staring at the paperwork. Her memory had been broken since the night in the woods. But now more pieces began to push through the fog. Faces. A nurse with trembling hands. A voice on the phone telling her to run. She had been trying to protect Eli all along. But what if someone else believed they were doing the same? Meanwhile, in the forest, the man with the hoodie, now soaked and shaking, finally spoke again. "She was going to give him away," he said. "Said she couldn't raise him, said she didn't want him. My sister wasn't well. After she died, I tried to do what she asked. Keep him safe. Find someone who could give him a better life." Jenna's heart pounded. "So you left him in the woods?" "I didn't leave him," the man said quickly. "I stayed nearby. Had food, water. I left him near the tree stump where I'd seen hikers pass before. I waited, but I never saw who took him. Just the dog. He kept coming back. I thought maybe the dog would protect him. I was right." He looked down at Shadow now, eyes filled with something close to reverence. "But when I saw her on the news," he continued, "when I saw Rachel, I knew something wasn't right. That baby wasn't hers. She's not his mother." Jenna stepped back, stunned. If that was true, then the entire story they'd been told was about to turn upside down. Rachel's memories, the missing time, the bond between her and Eli. Was it real? Or had she convinced herself of something she needed to believe? Tom exhaled deeply beside her. This just got a whole lot darker. Before Jenna could ask another question, a sharp sound cracked through the woods behind them. A branch breaking. Everyone froze. Then came another sound, closer. A step. West. Someone else was there. Jenna turned her light in the direction of the noise, but the beam caught only shadows between trees. Another step. Then a voice, harsh and low. "Step away from the boy." The man with the hoodie stiffened. "No, you don't understand. I'm his family." The voice didn't waver. "That's not what I heard." Jenna shouted. "Show yourself." But the forest stayed dark. Another figure emerged from the trees, face obscured by a dark hat and rain-soaked scarf. He was holding something long, metal. Jenna's stomach twisted. Not a weapon but a crowbar. Heavy. Shadow stepped forward again, a deep growl rumbling low in his throat. The tension snapped like a live wire. Jenna raised her voice. "Everyone stay still." But it was too late. The man in the hoodie lunged toward the backpack, yelling, "I'm not letting him take the boy." And in that moment, chaos. Shadow leapt, the stranger shouted, and Jenna reached for her radio as thunder exploded overhead. Somewhere in the middle of it all, a truth waited to be uncovered, One that would shatter everything they thought they knew about Eli and Rachel. But for now, all they had was the storm. Jenna didn't remember making the decision to move. Her body just acted. She rushed toward the clearing as Shadow sprang through the air, snarling, intercepting the second figure before he could get any closer. The stranger stumbled back, swinging the crowbar in panic, but it missed by inches. Rain poured down harder now, drenching everyone and blurring the world into streaks of gray and light. The man in the hoodie, clutching the soaked baby blanket, dove toward the backpack, pulling something else from inside. A worn folder, documents inside sealed in plastic. "This is everything," he shouted over the storm. "Proof. His name. His history." "You don't understand what they did," Jenna shouted back. "Then explain it now." But there was no time. The second man, still partially masked, reached into his coat and pulled out a piece of paper, an old ID badge, weathered and faded. When Jenna caught sight of it, her breath caught. It bore the logo of Child Protective Services. A worker. Or at least, someone who used to be one. "I was assigned to the boy," the man said. His voice calm now, eerily so. "Years before all this. His mother was mentally unwell. She wasn't fit to care for him. She vanished before the adoption could be finalized. That child was never supposed to resurface." Jenna stared. "You've been following him ever since." "I was trying to clean up a mess," he said flatly. "One that wasn't mine to begin with. But once Rachel took him, the case reopened. Everything risked being exposed." "Exposed?" Tom echoed, stepping closer. "You're not here for Eli, you're here to bury the truth." The man didn't deny it. His silence spoke louder than anything. Shadow, sensing the rising threat, positioned himself again in front of Jenna. The man's grip on the crowbar tightened just slightly. Then, from the shadows behind them, came a third sound, soft, uneven footsteps. Rachel. She had followed them, clutching Eli close, wrapped in her arms beneath a thick coat. Her eyes were wide, terrified but fierce. "You don't get to decide what happens to him," she said quietly, but with force. "He's not a file. He's not your secret to hide." The former CPS worker turned, surprised. "You shouldn't be here." "I remembered everything," Rachel said. "I remembered what you said to me at the clinic. You told me I'd ruin his life. That I was a danger to him. You never gave me a choice." Jenna looked between them, the puzzle pieces sliding into place. "You were the one who sent her running." Rachel nodded slowly, eyes not leaving the man. "He forged the withdrawal form. Told the hospital I'd abandoned Eli. But I didn't. I was going to come back once I was stable. He made sure that never happened." Tom moved quietly to Jenna's side. "We need to end this." But before they could move, the man raised the crowbar slightly, just enough to shift his weight. That's when Shadow leapt again, quicker than anyone expected. This time, the man went down hard, the metal clattering into the mud beside him. Jenna and Tom rushed forward, cuffing him before he could recover. The man in the hoodie dropped to his knees, overwhelmed. "I was just trying to do what my sister asked. I thought I was helping." Jenna looked at him for a long moment. "You did help. If you hadn't stayed nearby, he might not be here at all." Everyone stood there in the clearing, soaked and shivering, but finally, the air felt still. The baby in Rachel's arms stirred but didn't cry. He simply looked around, eyes wide, curious, safe. Back at the hospital, after everything had settled, Rachel sat in a small conference room with Marla, Jenna, and the man from the woods, whose name was Peter, finally revealed. "I know I'm not his birth mother," Rachel said softly. "But I never stopped loving him. Even when I didn't know who I was, I knew I had to protect him. That bond, it's real." Peter nodded. "I believe you. And after everything you've done for him, maybe it's you who was meant to raise him all along." Marla smiled gently. "There are ways to make that official, Rachel. If that's what you want." Rachel's eyes filled with tears, but this time, they weren't from fear or confusion. They were from hope. She looked down at Eli, who was gripping her finger tightly, as if anchoring her in the moment. But just as everything seemed to be falling into place, Jenna received a call. She stepped out to answer it, expecting another update about the paperwork or custody process. Instead, her face went pale. She returned to the room, voice tight. "There's something else." Everyone turned to her. They found another baby. The room went silent. Near the same woods. Same kind of blanket. This one was left just yesterday. Rachel stared in disbelief. "Another?" Jenna nodded slowly. "And no sign of who left it." But Shadow, he found that one too. As the realization settled in, a new wave of uncertainty washed over them. Maybe Eli wasn't the only child someone had tried to hide. And maybe the story wasn't over after all. The room sat in stunned silence, each person trying to grasp what Jenna had just said. Another baby. Another blanket. Another mystery unfolding just as they thought it had all come to an end. Rachel clutched Eli a little tighter, her heart pounding in her chest. Her eyes met Jenna's. Where was the baby found? Jenna hesitated. "Just a few miles from where we found Eli." It was a hiker this time. They heard crying near a stream and followed the sound. The baby was wrapped in the same kind of blue fabric, same pattern. Almost like someone was trying to send a message. Peter, still seated quietly near the window, leaned forward. "You think this one's connected to my sister?" Jenna shook her head. "We don't know yet. But it's strange. Too similar to ignore." The new baby had been rushed to the same hospital. Safe, but weak and undernourished. Doctors said he would recover just like Eli. But this second child brought more questions than answers. Who left him? Why now? And more importantly, were there others? Marla stepped in, trying to bring the conversation back to what mattered in the moment. "Let's not forget what's already been resolved. Rachel, the paperwork is moving forward. You'll officially be Eli's guardian soon. Peter, we've submitted your statement, and it's clear you were never a threat. You tried your best in a very messy situation." Peter nodded. "I just wanted my nephew to be safe. And maybe find peace for my sister too." Rachel glanced down at Eli, who was now sleeping peacefully in her arms. Her mind wandered back to the first night she found him, how broken and lost she felt, and how that tiny heartbeat had given her purpose. Even if the truth had been more complicated than she imagined, her love for him had never changed. That love was real. And now it was the one thing that held steady. Shadow returned to the hospital shortly after the second baby was found. The town had already started talking, people leaving food and supplies for the dog, calling him a hero, even offering him a home. But Shadow had made his choice long ago. Every time someone tried to leash him or take him in, he waited patiently and wandered back to Rachel's doorstep. His loyalty wasn't something anyone could buy or assign. He had chosen his family. The town of Ridgewell would never be the same after everything that had happened. Rumors had turned to whispers, and whispers turned to stories passed between neighbors and strangers alike. The tale of the starving German shepherd who saved a baby and uncovered secrets no one expected had become a symbol of something greater. Of resilience, of redemption, and of the strange way broken lives could come together to make something whole. Jenna stood outside the hospital a few days later, watching the sunrise break through the trees. Tom joined her, 2 cups of coffee in hand. "You think it's over?" he asked quietly. She took a sip, then shook her head. "Not over, but calmer. Sometimes the best we can do is bring truth to the surface and let people choose what comes next." He nodded, eyes distant. "And the second baby?" "They're calling her Lily," Jenna said with a faint smile. "She's doing well. They placed her in temporary care, but there's already a list of families wanting to adopt." Tom exhaled slowly. "That's something at least." Rachel and Peter later agreed to stay in touch, if not for each other, then for Eli. The boy was too young to understand now, but someday he'd ask about his past, about his mother, his uncle, and the dog who never left his side. And when that time came, Rachel would tell him the truth, not the cleaned-up version but the real story. The one where love didn't always come in the neatest package but was still powerful enough to change everything. Weeks passed, then months. Rachel and Eli moved into a small house near the edge of town. Nothing fancy but quiet and filled with light. Shadow claimed the porch as his own, stretching out under the morning sun, ears always alert. Rachel planted flowers in the garden, read books to Eli on the porch, and took long walks with Shadow through the woods that once held so many secrets. One crisp fall afternoon, Rachel received a letter in the mail. No return address, but inside was a photo. It showed a woman, young, tired-looking but kind-eyed, holding a baby wrapped in a blue blanket. On the back was a short note. "Thank you for loving what I couldn't. J." Rachel sat on the porch for a long time, staring at the photo. Her hands trembled, but not from fear. There were no answers in the letter, no names or explanations. Just a quiet gratitude that settled deep in her bones. Somewhere out there, someone had trusted her. And now, she would carry that trust for the rest of her life. Eli toddled out, holding a small toy in one hand and Shadow's tail in the other. He giggled, his joy pure and full, the kind only children possess. Rachel scooped him up and kissed his cheek. "You're safe now," she whispered. "We're all safe now." That night, as they all curled up together, Rachel, Eli, and the dog who started it all, there was no more fear, only peace. And though the town would forever remember the mystery, the missing past, and the twist no one saw coming, what lingered most was the truth that sometimes the most unexpected love is the one that saves everything.